So here is an antique Stanley No. 7 jointer plane. It's 22 inches long, which makes it ideal for jointing the edge of a workpiece nice and flat, especially on the types of workpieces that I use in my shop for small projects. So I pulled this off the shelf and I thought I was ready to go with it, but because of this southeast weather, I'm just going to go ahead and disassemble this plane. And to be honest, this plane has survived a number of moves, and I don't use it very often, but when I do, it sure comes in handy. Now, one thing I want to point out while I've got this apart is when I pulled this out, I've got the cap iron and the iron, but I've got some shavings stuck in between those two, and that's not a good sign. That means that the cap iron is not completely tight to the iron. So as I'm reconditioning this plane and getting it ready to go, I'm going to have to check that and make sure that that is corrected. You don't want chips jamming up in between your cap iron and your iron. So now I'll just take my brush. You can use an old chip brush. These are cheap. Get these at discount tool stores by the dozen. Okay, so I got everything nice and cleaned out there. Now, when I originally purchased this plane many decades ago, I went to the trouble of making sure the frog assembly was nice and flat. So I don't think I need to do anything with that. The lateral adjustment lever here has always had some rust on it. It used to be plated, but the plating is obviously worn off, so I'm not too terribly concerned about that either. I guess I should go ahead and try to address some of these rust issues. So again, I'm going to squirt a little magical WD-40 on there with my non-woven abrasive pad. See if I can get some of this rust taken off. Again, you know, this plane is an antique. It's probably over 100 years old, so I'm sure it's seen its fair share of use, and therefore I'm not too terribly concerned that it's in like new condition. All I need it to be is functional. Now, if you're a collector of planes, you may have to decide, you know, to what extent do you restore a hand plane. It depends on the collectability and what you intend to do with it. When I purchase a plane, it's because I want to use it in my shop. It's not because I want it to sit on a shelf and collect dust. But I know a lot of collectors, they have high value items that they occasionally sell, and that's an important aspect of the hand tool industry, is keeping these tools active and alive. There's a lot of history in who made these tools and how they were made. It looks like I've got some pretty serious rust going on here, so I may have to get a little more aggressive. Let's try some sandpaper. This is a, I believe this is 320 or 400 grit wet dry sandpaper. Yeah, it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. Better than the abrasive pad was anyway. Now here I can actually feel the bumps of the rust that has developed, and that bothers me. I wish that wouldn't have happened, but I'm in the southeast United States, so in an unconditioned shop, unair conditioned shop, so things like this are bound to happen. And the sandpaper is doing a pretty good job of getting things leveled out. Again, there are going to be some stains, and in some cases there might even be some mild pitting of the steel where the rust has eaten into the surface a little bit and left a hollow spot. Again, in most situations that's not a concern. Yes, my obsessive compulsiveness wants it perfectly shiny and new, but the practical side of me realizes that on a tool that's over 100 years old, that won't happen. Got a little more up on the toe here. And if you're smarter than I am, you'll wear gloves when you do this. Keep your hands clean. But I pulled this plane out to use it and realized that it needed some work, so I just went at it and didn't think about the gloves. So if I run my fingers across these rust areas, they're flat, but there's one or two areas here that have just a little bit of pitting where they've eaten into the surface a little bit. And again, I'm not too concerned, and when I get more time, I may come back and work on this some more. But right now it is perfectly functional. Go ahead and address this other side real quick. Looks like this had some corrosion, pretty heavy corrosion here at one time. I've got some pitting going on there. So here I'll just take some rust preventative and give it a good wipe. So if you live in a humid area like I do, you want to occasionally pull your planes off the shelf, and any other hand tools you have for that matter, and make sure they're not rusting beyond the point where you can clean them up. Now I can turn my attention to the cap iron and blade assembly. As I mentioned before, I noticed when I took this down that there were some chips caught in between these two. So I need to address that issue. To properly remove a cap iron from the blade, you loosen the screw, turn the blade over, slide the cap iron back so that as you rotate it, you avoid nicking the cutting edge. And then you can simply slide the cap iron out without damaging the blade. Now, this is the original cap iron I got with the plane, and it's obviously got some age to it, some rust, some dirt, debris. I'm not too terribly concerned about it, but what I am concerned about is why the chips were getting stuck in between the cap iron and the blade. So one thing to check is you can put your cap iron back on and slide it back down towards the cutting edge, and then you could sight down in through that crack and see, especially if you hold it up to the light, you can see if any light is passing through. And if there is, that also means some chips can pass through. So I see just a little bit of a sliver of light in this area here, which probably means this cap iron is a little bit twisted. And I've had that happen before, especially on antique planes. Sometimes I've had to resort to putting them in a vise and making an attempt to twist them back. Another way you can help ensure that you've got a tight fit against the blade is to take a sharpening stone. Here I'm using a diamond stone. And I'm going to place my cap iron back here and let the back end hang off the stone. And I'm just going to rub this back and forth to see if I can flatten that front edge. So I'm looking here along this front edge to see if I've got an even straight surface all the way across. And again, you're going to need to check that with your plane iron. Set it back in place, move it up to close to the cutting edge, and then check again to see if you've got any light showing through. I can verify now that this blade is twisted because I've got light showing up on this edge, but none down here. But as I tighten it, it seems to straighten out. Now I've got no light showing along this cutting edge. So we're going to go with that and see how that works. So I've got that cap iron taken care of. Again, when you remove it, slide it back, rotate it. You can take it off without risking damage to the blade. Now this blade's got a little bit of use on it, I can tell already. It's been a while since I've touched it, and feels like I've got just a little bit of a nick on there. So I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this up, and we'll see what we can do with it. So I've got this blade all sharpened up and ready to go. So now I can put this back in my joiner plane and see how it works. Now again, when I put my cap iron on my blade, I run it up to within about a 32nd of an inch. Really, really close to the cutting edge. And you want to make sure that the cap iron is parallel to the cutting edge as well. Set this back in. Put my cap iron back on. Now I'm going to sight down the plane and adjust my blade and take some shavings and see what happens.